Boom! Here we are. It is Thursday. This is Why Libertarian. I am Matt. Your nightly dose, at least Monday through Thursday, of Liberty Live. Really quickly, as usual, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, upvote me if you are watching me on the blockchain. I'm going to throw into the scroll below my Linktree address. Definitely check that out. Before I bring on the guest tonight, last night's episode, I put out an announcement about a giveaway for crypto that I'm going to be doing this month and actually repeating every single month after that. And I gave everyone instructions on how to get into that giveaway opportunity. And so I just have a quick update on that. If you want information on how to get into it, if you go to my Linktree, the very top link says enter the May Liberty Hive giveaway. It will take you to the video that gives you the full top to bottom of how you start your account and get involved in the Hive giveaway. I am giving away 100 Hive on May 31st, and then I will also be giving you the instructions on how to enter the June giveaway on May 31st. So definitely check that out. If you don't want to watch the video, you can also check out my Twitter page, and if you check on my profile, the pinned tweet is literally a thread that walks step by step with visuals on how you can sign up as well as get into the giveaway. And I'm going to give you one more thing that I'm going to share here to you, and this is like fantastic, absolutely fantastic. It is like proof of concept in terms of how social media and blockchain social media, decentralized social media works. I am actually going to pull up this post right here, which was done by Dilly, who is one of the first entrants. An absolutely fantastic post. The pictures, the story that he tells is absolutely fantastic. So if you get the opportunity when you're on the Liberty community, check that out. But the one thing I want you to pay attention to is this dude's doing this vlog post to get in on a 100 Hive giveaway, and he's already earned on the post between his posting and the curation component of it over $18. So for a 100 Hive giveaway, the entry he has earned on, which is absolutely fantastic. We have some curation set up for that so that when you do post to the community, you will get some positive reinforcement. People will upvote your stuff. So definitely get involved in that giveaway. It is well worth it. And believe me, when you get on the Hive platform, it will change your world. How you view social media will change forever once you get onto the Hive platform. So, that being said, I have an absolutely fantastic guest this evening. I am joined by I believe one of, or the developer for the PEAKD front end for the Hive blockchain, Jarvie. Jarvie, how are you, sir?
Super good. Super
Awesome.
well.
Awesome. Was I accurate? You are the dev or you're one of the team?
I'm one of the team.
Okay, awesome.
I am one of the founders and the spokesperson and the ideas person. I am not a software developer.
Yeah. That's okay. Not many of us are. Well, so anyone who is not familiar with you or anyone who is not familiar with PEAKD, just really quickly, what's your background? How did you come to the Hive blockchain ecosystem? And then, why PEAKD? Why a front end for the Hive blockchain?
So my route in was I had a roommate many years ago, talking 7, 8 years ago, that ended up getting married, and the first 3 months of his marriage, he produced a documentary called Life on Bitcoin. And I had actually met him and other people because of liberty-minded sort of things, coincidentally. Anyway, so I had put some in Bitcoin, and it went up in 2017 quite a lot. And then I was like, I should look at this and see if I'm any good at market trading, since now I have a bunch of money that, that's kind of fun to play with. And
Yeah.
I found Steam, which was a predecessor of Hive. I started blogging there, and I was like, well, I've got some content, some pictures to share. And then I created a pseudo community, and I found found some friends there, and I found a developer that's like, hey, I'm going to create another interface. And I was like, wait, what? Oh, wait, yeah, because this blockchain thing means we don't have to use this site. It could be the thing you're creating. And then it became one of the largest ones on Steam. And then when we migrated, it became the biggest one for Hive.
Yeah.
And then I started spending tons, obviously developing the site.
Awesome. So, in terms of developing the front end and stuff like that, what kind of considerations went into that? I mean, so I think most people have to understand that a front end on Hive is different than, and I've explained this a couple of times, but I feel like I need to repeat myself because Web 3.0 is completely different than Web 2.0. A front end, people are used to Facebook is Facebook, right? But a front end is different in blockchain world because, say, the posts that you post to Facebook, another front end would be able to pull that, and Facebook wouldn't have a monopoly on, your pictures and stuff like that. So in Hive world, a front end is kind of like a portal to viewing the data that's on the blockchain. So why really a front end? Okay. Why not, a video game or, something else?
Well, for me, because I've always been very connected to the social media and influencers. I have, I've done a lot of social media, been well known in certain circles. Didn't really pursue it heavily, but I do have, dozens of friends with millions of YouTube subscribers, and just heavy along that lines. And so I get that area. I like that area, and I've been a content creator. So that's the answer to that part of the question. How Hive is different is, I guess, in what we state on PEAKD as our main thing. We put right up front on the website is it's social media with true ownership. So that's why it's different than Facebook, different than Twitter, different than YouTube and all these other ones. Is that it true ownership? Yeah. That's what makes it different. The fact that PEAKD then becomes your partner. So the relationship changes because of what Hive is. PEAKD is your partner because Hive offers true ownership. This content is yours. When you put your information onto Facebook, it says, that's now they need to own it because they need to be able to do whatever they want, but they also need to shut you out if they decide to, because they have their terms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And all those sorts of considerations, right? So, I mean, it's as simple as that. I guess I could go further into it, but really, if you get the idea of true ownership, then it's powerful, and that's what we're offering, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a different world. I think the first question that a lot of people are going to ask is, if you're developing this front end, is there financial incentive for you to create the front end? Like, what does that look like? Are you doing it to raise revenue, or are you doing it just kind of like out of the goodness of your heart or passion or something like that?
I am doing it because I believe in this concept of decentralization and true ownership. The money that we will be able to raise and get through the company will be able to push it out there further. I think that's the real answer. We can hire people, the more people to make the site even better, more people to work on PR and marketing to get out this message in the platform. Yeah.
And
Comes with the
so,
side perk of being something nice to create that you don't have to go to 9 to 5 every day of your life.
Yeah. I think that if it isn't, that should be everyone's goal, I would hope. But I don't know. Some people like 9 to 5. But so that being said,
about an aspect of freedom, that means that's financial independence, not being dependent on someone else. And that's what we're talking about when you're talking about Hive and PEAKD. I would love to see it so that you are not dependent. Like, it's about dependencies. If you're dependent on a soft, a front end, like, we could go into PEAKD and create all these catches, things that make you have to keep coming back to PEAKD. And if we die, everything dies with it.
Yep.
Go all in. And that is a actually smart business move. And most businesses tend to do that. But it is also smart to create something completely different that no one else is doing. So if you are offering to people and say, look, you don't have to be dependent in us. If something happens to us, die, or the developer leaves, or something happens, or the government comes after, or whatever, like, we are not creating severe dependencies, because you've already interviewed other places that do the same thing. Maybe not as well as what we're doing or what we will be doing, but and you may be sad, dang it, I have to go to those other things. But
well, what I appreciate is it's true, or at least as close to true free market as it gets, right? So, like, a couple of people might ask, okay, so PEAKD isn't the only front end that you can basically choose to use to interact with the information that's on the Hive blockchain. So do you see the other, front end developers as competitors? Do you see them as friends, or how do you view them?
Our product requires them to exist, because if we are offering decentralization, that means choice. You have to have choice to have actual freedom. You could say, oh, you're free to do this, but if you only have one option, I don't consider that freedom. Maybe there's an argument if someone says that still could be that way, but you have to have choices. And so in the older media of Facebook and things like that, it lacked that sort of thing. So we require them to exist. We create new features that we do in a decentralized protocol. So we created badges, which are a decentralized list of users that you can, so your group of people, you can assign them a badge. Why the Liberty badge. Name it Liberty badge. And then with that account, you follow people and they get the badge. That whole system we could have done in a very centralized manner, but we said, no, we'll use Hive technology to do it. And therefore, any of the other platforms can integrate it. I think maybe Hive blog has done it to an extent. Not entirely sure. I don't go on there too often. But so a bunch of those features that we're doing, we kind of do, and then some of the other ones pick up on it. So
yeah. Well, I also love the fact that the ecosystem exists in such a way that if you're interacting from one, place, one entry point or one portal to view the information, there is a connectivity where, if I post something to three speak, so to speak, there is a certain amount of kind of like automated sharing of all of that information too. Whereas in the world right now, I mean, just for instance, this live stream, right? This live stream, if I put this up on Facebook, it doesn't automatically share to YouTube. I need a tool for me to be able to stream to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all the rest. On the blockchain, there are some built-in, efficiencies where if you do something in one place, it's shared on the other places too. So you don't have to worry about if you're only using PEAKD to view the blockchain, if someone else isn't using PEAKD, they can still follow you, right? Like they can still get your information and your posts and your content, which is fantastic. And they can view it in the form or the place that they choose to view it, which is awesome. Yeah. So let me ask you more about kind of like the philosophical piece of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely seems like were you around for the Steam hard fork? Were you a part of the ecosystem at that point in time?
I've been on this blockchain for 3.5 years. So I was around for that.
So from your viewpoint, was it a difficult choice to hard fork and go with Hive, or was it something that just fit in line with what you thought it should be?
It perfectly fit, because we needed decentralization, which again, hi Acidio, which again means lack of dependencies, right? And we were very dependent back in those days on the company called Steam Incorporated. They were doing development, and they kind of had a stranglehold, and they didn't foster an environment for other developers to come in and do things, and for the community to kind of go in a group decided direction. So moving away from that was easy. Moving away from their funds that they had was maybe more difficult. They had a lot of developers, so there was a time where it was like, hope it works out, hope we get to developers, hope we find something. It worked. Still could be many more developers, and it still could be more decentralized in that world. But also the second area of decentralization was the amount of steam that they had gotten right at the beginning, pretty much before anyone else could really get it. And then it inflated to this amount that was it was kind of overpowering. It was way too centralized. There's a similar issue happening that's not being talked a lot about with Dogecoin. It's very centralized in the hands of just a few accounts, and that can cause problems. Of course, Doge is also something that's not being developed, so they don't have to worry about this person choosing which way Doge goes. Because the person with a lot of that token could also make a lot of decisions, and they could attack the governance, which is what ended up happening when it transferred hands to someone else that didn't say like, hey, we are using this to developers, and this guy's like, no, I bought it, I can use it for whatever I want.
Right.
And so that social contract between the people that had purchased afterwards and said, I am okay with how this is right now, and they have a level of trust with Steam Incorporated. Well, that trust left when Steam Incorporated basically sold.
Yeah.
And so you see just in that concept of why blockchains are important, and the fact of not having to trust someone, because we know how that went with Google. Do no evil. And they weren't until they did.
Yeah.
Until
Well,
someone else came in, and it just, the people that started it, they weren't there anymore. The people that made those promises were gone.
And so, Acid brings up a good point. A lot of people are probably going to end up losing money on Doge if they stick around for too long and the bottom falls out, right? And then, if they do so, if they were leveraged too far in that direction, they'll blame the idea of crypto. I think in line with that, something also that a lot of people will say is when I bring Hive to someone's attention who's not really savvy about blockchain technology, they'll be like, it's just the new thing, like something else will come along, or like, Jack Dorsey's already talking about creating his own blockchain social media, so they're just going to end up co-opting that too. And I'm trying to like hold the line and be like, whoa, hold on. Centralized blockchain and decentralized blockchain are like apples and oranges. Like they are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so what would you say to those people? I mean, is that a good way of approaching that, or is there something else that you would tell them about why there is a stark difference between those two types of platform?
I would probably take a step back and talk about foundations of what it means to be more decentralized. Hive isn't the most decentralized blockchain in the world, and we can go through it as to why this or that, but it is definitely the most decentralized blockchain in the world that can do social media, and the other ones really can't, and it has all the foundations that are needed. So my worry is that someone coming in would say, hey, look, we have a couple of features that will provide an aspect of social media, and okay, well, what about the ownership of the tokens it's based on? What about who gets to decide what changes get to be made? Because someone that has spent a lot of money to launch something, they often don't have a lot of interest in giving a lot of other people control of the thing they spent a lot of money on.
Yeah. So
that aspect of us having been around for many years and having people and the money having dispersed to many, many people, and the developers being in there, and that all that is kind of needed, and someone jumping in, I feel like it would be hard for them to create something more decentralized. It would take time. It takes a level of trust in the system. Years of this being around without having been hacked, and the issues with the reward mechanisms being known and in the forefront, the issues with resources and the payment aspects are we don't have a upfront transaction cost. All those issues are fleshed out. So when you jump into something new, I feel like that takes a lot of time to recognize where that's going to go. There have been many forks of Steem and Hive, and they're like, let's test their experiments. They don't end up well. And it's not just, it's the user base. You have to have a user base to have a real social media.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I would say is you've been there, done that, right? Like the test was there, right? So there was a test of how committed, I would say, the community was to the decentralized aspect of the blockchain. And you had some of the community that stuck around. They stuck with what was already in place, even though things kind of changed for what I think a lot of folks who are, more in the Hive purists, right, would say they think things changed for the worse, or at least that were, antithetical to this idea of decentralization. And y'all pulled it off. I mean, 12 months ago, you essentially said, look, we're not happy with the direction this is going. We're going to continue to do what we had originally intended to do by hard forking and going off in our own direction and continuing on this
Yeah.
truly or as close to decentralized structure as we could possibly get.
Let me take a second to talk about another area of decentralization that will be interesting and also helps explain in a slightly more technical manner how Hive works and how PEAKD works. But
Okay.
I think getting that vision, this isn't the, I know your users aren't the intro people, getting that
Yep.
vision really helps. In Steam, back in those days, and we had a website and we just shut it down because we didn't want to be involved with Steam, called Steam Peak. There was really, but it's like an API node. So blockchain, tons and tons of text. That's what it is. It's like a database of, it stores information.
Yep.
But when I go in there and I say, I want to see why libertarians post, there's not some little thing that goes through the entire 60 gigabytes of information and goes, oh, there's a mention of why libertarian. There is a database that is separate. It is a very traditional database, like a SQL sort of database that has everything kind of listed, and it knows all of your posts, and it can verify that those things happen because they exist in the blockchain. And there's people that can look and see that database is true to the blockchain. That's not, that database, it doesn't impact your wallet, so that, there can be, you're not too worried about it. But
yeah.
So and so those databases are there. And so what PEAKD does, we don't store anyone's information. We don't store their posts, I should say. We have bookmarks, we have drafts and stuff like that. We have settings, if you want light mode or dark mode. But the information, your setting, your posts, your connections, all that stuff, we go and we do a query of that server. Back in the Steam days, there was really just one place to go to get that information. If it went down or if they were malevolent, think about it, then there's a problem. It's centralized. Now we were forced to, like, everyone kind of stood up. There's more than enough right now to equal, what Steam Incorporated, the company, had when they had a lot of money to pay on these servers. There's a lot of people now that have stepped up. There's a dozen, and PEAKD offers, like, which one do you want to use? Now, they all kind of tend to go to the same source, like they all provide their information pretty similarly, so it's not very decentralized in that way. So someone, but there are 12 of them. If one goes down, we auto switch you to the next one.
Yeah.
Switch you to the next one. So.
Yeah, that's a huge selling point too, because something that this conversation almost always does. Shane Hazel's on. I don't know if you know Shane, Jarvie, but Shane is the man in Georgia. He is the libertarian who took down the Republican or what would be the Republicans if they were actually Republicans in Georgia. But so Shane is actually the person who originally called my attention to Hive.
Okay.
But so in this conversation, a lot of people will then kind of take the next step, and they would say, okay, well, part of the selling point of this is also getting away from censorship, right? Centralized censorship in terms of like some private individual or company, but also in terms of, governmental influence, right? And so if one government, whether it be United States, China, India, any of the large, governments, if they want to infiltrate the blockchain or try and shut it down or try and censor it, there is a redundancy built into this system, right? And so because there's not one central point of control for each one of the nodes that are being operated, there is redundancy where
and interfaces.
Yeah.
Nodes, interfaces, the blockchain producers, the ones that keep it running, that what we call witnesses, which is a silly word, but call them blockchain producers. So they're all kind of decentralized, right? So
Yeah.
they would have to get to all of them.
Yes, and not to mention the fact that if they were also going to try and censor information from the past, right? Because it's blockchain, they would also have to censor everything that basically followed that moment in time as well, which makes it even more difficult. So I think.
Let me.
Go ahead.
If we're talking philosophically or whatever / marketing, let me propose that the best way to go about this discussion is not by talking about censorship. It's talking about true ownership.
Mm.
There's so many other platforms that are trying to talk about censorship and how we won't censor. We won't censor you.
Yeah.
Until when? It's a pinky promise. It's a pinky promise.
Well, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
They have no way to really put that in force. It's another Google, the Parler or the some of the other ones. What they have is a terms of service. And how do you change the terms of service? With the delete key.
Yep.
It never existed. Or we're changing it. Agree to our new terms. So and some of these are focused so heavily on censorship, you are just trading your trust that you no longer have on Facebook or Twitter, and you're moving it to someone else, and then you're gonna have to move it to someone else. If you start talking about true ownership instead, I think the discussion goes so much better, and then we're not lumped in with all these other people and this discussion.
Yep.
And it applies to everyone, not just libertarians, not just whoever, not just people who like Trump or didn't like Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Your content is yours. You get to edit it. One form of editing is to take it all, hit the delete key, and it's deleted, right?
Yep.
I just think that's a better way around it. And now, if you do want to talk about the concept of censorship, what we don't like, I feel it's ingenuine to talk about how we hate censorship, because to some extent we all are censoring. There is too much noise. There's these things we don't like. What we have a problem with is who is censoring.
That's an interesting point.
We don't have a problem with when we don't follow someone, we don't subscribe, we're doing the soft form of censorship. We don't want to see their content.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the best platform gives the tools to users to do it themselves. And they do it really well. It could be overwhelming, so they have to provide really good tools. Recently, there has been a push towards creating what someone called mute lists, or what we would like to call mute lists, because you don't have the time to go out and mute 10,000 people that talk about cats because you hate cats, or elevators because you're, what is that thing where you're afraid of elevators? And so someone creates a list and you say follow that list and that is your experience. And so someone could also say, and we could simply just offer it to the users, these people plagiarize, or these people use profanity, or these people, like, I can't have my kids looking at this stuff, sort of thing. This, someone has stewardship over like a kids or themselves, or, like they get to decide. I think that's the way you frame the conversation about censorship. So I
love that. I love that angle on it, because you're not saying that there is no censorship. You're saying that you get to personally censor the things that are being presented to you, right? But at the same time, you're not sitting there saying, because I don't want to be presented these things, no one else should be presented them. You're saying essentially that, you know what, the things that, so I'm a big George Carlin fan, Okay, some from way back.
Hardcore history, or no, that's not. No, that's not. He always talks about hardcore history, right?
Yes, yeah. But
Yeah.
so
and Carlin. Who's George Carlin then?
No. George Carlin he's the stand-up guy who did the 7 deadly words,
okay.
like 7 sinful words, or whatever that you can't say and whatnot. But he had this one story where he talks about, essentially a woman from the Midwest who calls up a TV executive and says, "I don't like what you're playing on your channel." And he said the TV exec turns around and he says, "Well, whatever her name was, like, there's 2 knobs on the television. One of them changes the channel and the other one turns it off." Right? Like that. I love that, because what you just said is the purest form of, what in the United States we call the First Amendment, right? You can say whatever you want. And if you want to choose to, remove yourself from hearing it or not be presented with it, you can do that. You have the freedom of association as well, or not to associate. And I love that aspect of it, just giving people the tools. I think what also comes with that as well is
this is kind of that helps all side of the aisles. This tool is for everyone.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, and it's agnostic. Like, it doesn't care. Like, however you want to craft your feed. I think the other thing that this also kind of delves into, and I would love to hear your opinion on it, is this idea of algorithms. Like, you touched on it earlier, like algorithms that are essentially selecting what you're presented with, right? As opposed to empowering you with what you would like to see.
Yeah. And PEAKD, this is our hope and goal, is to also see this exist. Algorithm freedom of choice exist. Algorithms are difficult, though, and take a lot of work, and take servers, and take a lot of work. It's different than creating a front end. So maybe it's not fully developed that way right now. We have a few what we would call sorting mechanisms, algorithms, right? They're an algorithm is how you sort information that comes to you.
Right.
So there is on Hive, there's always exist, even from Steam. The Steam Incorporated company created 2 main algorithms. One we call the trending algorithm, one we call the hot algorithm.
Yep.
They're just names.
Yep.
We also have another way of sorting posts, which is by chronological. So there are a couple of other ways to sort comments. I'd love to see there be more sorting mechanisms. I'd love to see people offer more choice to something more similar to a trending, because if you don't have choice, you don't have freedom, There's not options. And therefore, what it also does, it's fairer to the trending algorithm, because then people put less stress, they get less worked up about it. Why am I not up on there? It's like, well, if you have another one, then there's less stress on the one that people think is failing, because the trending algorithm tends to be time and time / the Hive reward pool mechanism. So it's a combination of those 2 things. So if you don't care about Hive reward pools, then that's not going to be super helpful to you. Yeah. There could be things that integrate views, interactions, try to find a way for real interactions, because you can program things on the blockchain. So not every interaction is what some people would call a live personal interaction. You could figure out all sorts of different things and create an algorithm. And if it's really good and vetted and people like it, talk to us. Yeah. Remember when
Acid's giving you some real-time feedback here. Sort by controversy, like Reddit has. A lot of downvotes plus comments equals highest up. Yeah.
and if someone creates an algorithm and provides an API for this, and I'm not saying that we won't do it, but it's difficult, and it would take us a lot of time, because we have other things ahead of that.
Well, I think that the other key that people need to understand if they're not on the platform, that this idea of like what's trending or what's hot or what's new, you get to choose also the algorithm by which you're viewing what's being presented to you, as opposed to the way it is right now. You have very limited options. Like your only real option on most of the Web 2.0 platforms is to mute or block someone. That's it. And it's all manual, right? Like it's all one by one. Whereas and whatever gets presented to you in your feed is this universalized algorithm that just sits there to increase the amount of time you spend on the platform. It has absolutely nothing to do with enriching your life,
And
right?
that's why you see so many controversial things, because the algorithm has said our objective is to get more views. So therefore, if we do something that gets people heated both ways, it is going to generate more views. And therefore, that's what's going to do. And that's what's going to boil and bubble up people and that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that that's something we would never consider, even though I may be like, I think we would love to get away from that aspect of Facebook and Twitter. But it, if someone provides an API. But also think about this, all those sorting algorithms on Twitter, Facebook, and Google, they're all non-transparent. So you don't exactly know how it's all working out.
Oh, yeah.
And they do it so that it's not gamed, and I understand that. But it comes with problems because of that.
Yeah. So one point of feedback, and then also a question from Shane here. So I can't pull it up on the screen because I have to find another way to get Vim comments from Hive to show up on the live cast, but I'll be working on that. So Kyron is on Vim and says, "I'd love to see more sorting mechanisms on Hive. I would vote for a proposal like that." And then, Kyron also followed up with a question. Any thoughts about the DHF? Anything you would like to see changed?
Those two are connected because he said proposal and then he said DHF. And they are the same thing. Decentralized Hive Fund. So it is a fund that goes to people that submit a proposal to do work or to do something that has value to Hive.
Yep.
And then people that have a stake, an ownership, Hive Power. It's a non-liquid form of the Hive token. They get to vote, and then funding goes to them based on what they've suggested. I want to create, and we would vote on that too. If someone were to create a different sorting mechanism, an algorithm, and not just a fun way of things theoretically should be done, but also the back end actual needs for it, totally would vote for it.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think anything that allows folks to be able to further, kind of craft their feed, I think is absolutely fantastic. I think it would be empowering.
Well, then you would love PEAKD, because a lot of these concepts of being able to choose your experience are built into PEAKD. So there's a struggle there. A lot of people, the design theory is make it as simple as possible. And that makes things, then people will enjoy it and they'll understand it, and they're right.
Yeah.
The real awesome thing is to give people choices and options and to give them tools to be powerful, for them to be powerful, and for them to do things that they want to do. It's difficult to make a UI that is intuitive. And intuitive means to know how to do something without having to be taught. You intuit it. And I'm not saying that we're 100% there, but that has been from day one. We used from May of 2000, and I think it was actually May of 2018. So 3 years ago this month. Intuitive was our primary word, and new user, your audience is who we want to listen to when they come in and say that thing you said, Jarvie, and the word intuitive, this wasn't intuitive. We want to hear that, and we will react to that.
I would say the two pieces of feedback I get from folks that aren't on the platform yet that are presented with it are, one, make it easier for me to sign up. and the second one is make it more intuitive in terms of the graphic user interface, right? And so I think both of those, any development that happens in either one of those areas, I think is time and money or crypto well spent. Acid said, once you go PEAKD, you don't go back, which is funny.
Yeah.
Bostock's laughing on that one.
Do you know what PEAKD stands for?
That is a good question. I didn't even ask that. What does PEAKD stand for?
Well, I think you probably guess from what we've talked a lot about.
Yeah. Peak decentralization. Is that what it is?
Yes.
I went with the PG answer. So
and also, just as a side note, we don't care if someone says peaked or PEAKD, because it is also a play on the word peaked, like it piqued your interest. Or to reach the top of a mountain. You have, that is an aspiring goal to.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Shane asks, as this is a young idea socially, do you have any predictions on the timeline or the bell curve of adoption with respect to, social media on the blockchain?
Well, it seems like this is the perfect timing in the world. I do not actually think that Hive was perfectly positioned for this timing. But the good news, bad news is the way that the world is going, there are going to be thing after thing after thing that is going to make it still continue to be perfect. I don't think it's going to get so amazing that everyone's like, oh, forget it. We're fine on Twitter or Facebook. They're shaped up. They've shaped everything up.
They learned their lesson, They learned
their lesson. We're fine. So, and then that's, like, I wish we were there. We are, and we're doing everything we can. I guess this is an interesting side note. I mentioned at the beginning, I have dozens of friends that have millions of subscribers. Some have tens of millions. Why have I not brought them on? Because there are still things you don't want someone to come in and just leave. These are people that need it super simple. Yep. They don't need it simple. A YouTuber,
they'll figure it out.
Popular opinion, they spend dozens of hours. They learn. They study their craft. They will go all out to learn something, even if it's complicated. Especially back in the day when YouTube was more complicated. They go to conferences. I've been to those conferences. They'll go to a week-long conference, 10 hours a day studying something, but it's not them. It's their users that this has to be a good experience for. And they need to be able to go in, click a button. They need to have certain things. They need to not worry about transaction cost and moving Hive around and stuff like that. So I think when some of those things are done, his question was about the bell curve of this mass adoption. Like, we can still do a lot of things right now. We can still I feel like your audience is the type that is willing to take a few minutes and learn this stuff. They're watching your videos. You talk about this all the time. You're talking them through how to do certain things. That's fine. That's good. That's what they need, and they'll be benefited for it. And
they are. I can tell you that the crowd that I speak to, one of the biggest selling points is, or one of the biggest conversations is, like, when you're on social media, you realize you are the product, right? Like, you are essentially what makes social media profitable, right? Like, if you weren't there, flame posting on Twitter or putting up, content like this on YouTube and things like that, that those platforms wouldn't exist. Like, there's not enough employees who are creative enough at YouTube to do this stuff, right? Like, it's all of the people that put the content up there that make those platforms successful. And so the next conversation that you have is, do you think that they meaning the folks that are essentially in the power seats at these centers of power, do you think they have the autonomy to shut you down or tell you what you can or can't say or cut your, I mean, like a couple of years ago, there was almost a mass revolt from YouTube because they cut the compensation structure for these folks that had millions of views and things like that. I mean, that is something that, like you said, Hive might not be ideally positioned at this moment in time, but this is Hive's moment in time. Yes. Like the cultural trends that are playing out right now will continue to play out, and that's why this is one of those things where it was like it took me a little while to get introduced to this, but once I got involved, I was like, this is it. I was like, this is going to remake technology on the face of the planet, because once you get your hands involved in it, you can see how, like out into the future, how it is ridiculously superior to the traditional tech that's out there right now.
I don't know if you had a question for me or if I can ask you a question regarding what you just said.
Go for it.
Why? You said you believe it's amazing and it's perfectly centered. What are the things that drew you to Hive?
I would say that,
because I have a supposition you're going to say something and we're going to have a conversation about it.
I can tell you the first thing that hit me when I started to get involved in the Hive ecosystem was the sense of community that I felt.
Okay.
As opposed to the fact that I was coming here for entertainment, right? Like I don't now that doesn't mean that there's not videos or content that are entertaining, but there is a much more human aspect to the way that I interact with people on Hive than I interact with people on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. And it just seems like there is a mechanical method to interacting with people on those Web 2.0 platforms. Whereas here, it is legitimately like everyone is kind of like trying to make the platform better. And the people that detract from that, it's not like they're demonized or anything like that, but it doesn't fly. Like people are not going to put up with your crap if they are trying to build something and you're trying to tear it down. And so I definitely get that impression, as opposed to, you know, something just being served up to you and you know, you're essentially just sitting here like, you know, there's experiments where they talk about, you know, getting the rats hooked on heroin and then walking over and like hitting the button repeatedly. You know, that's exactly what Web 2.0 social media feels like to me. Whereas Web 3.0 feels completely different because there's more of a social human aspect to it. Did you think I was going to say that, or
puts you more in the driver's seat though, and gives you more responsibility? The rat is basically being told exactly what to do, and people are like, "Oh, I'm used to this." So the switch over to an experience where you are where more is expected out of you is going to be hard for people. Also, you did mention, I just read the comment.
Yeah.
You did mention that the experience has been great for you. I do warn that is a personal thing. Because that may not be for someone else, though.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I would also say that, to your point where you're saying, okay, the build out isn't to the point where certain people will find it rewarding, right? Or as rewarding as others that are early adopters. I agree with you. I think if you're coming to this world and you're expecting to be presented with the same exact thing that we were presented with if you were on Twitter or Facebook, just without any censorship or you know, the chance that you might get, you know, your account suspended or canceled. That's not the truth of it. The truth of it is that it is a different world. There is a learning curve. You know, I mean, it's not just being on the platform. You know, I have found it extremely rewarding to be in Discord and talking to people and building relationship that way. It also helps me to be a content creator because I'm interviewing people like you and building relationship that way.
The key thing is you. You have that capability of going somewhere and making a good experience of your experience. And that's about being in the driver's seat, and you have some of these capacities. I think it's partly, hopefully, a change in the way that people are and the people interact with social media, is that they go out and they make. I noticed just a couple videos ago, you made yourself a community, which is a product on Hive. Like, you made a community. You're going out there and you have purpose. You have a focus. That's awesome. So that's easy for people like you, harder for others, and hopefully it could still be a good experience for them. Because the thing I was expecting you to say was money.
I got to be honest, it helps a little bit.
That's why I came.
Yeah.
And I came because of a YouTuber who, looking back, taught us. He didn't know anything. It was so funny looking back. I look back and I'm like, wow, he told us everything wrong.
Yeah.
Everything wrong. We were going to get rich and doing nothing and not even having any powered up tokens, and just vote on everyone and you get rich. And it was all about this reward stuff. He didn't even know the lingo. He would just go in there. But I came, I stayed, and I learned that the guy was full of crap. And the whole community of Steam/Hive has had what I consider an issue of a centralized focus on rewards, and it's gotten way, way better. So now you've come in recently, and you don't see maybe this culture of everything depends on that dollar amount that you have on there. That Hive amount that you're getting.
Yeah.
And as you notice, if you look on PEAKD, we're talking about true ownership, because that's cool. That's what we can offer. That other places can bribe you, but only Hive/PEAKD can give you true ownership.
Yeah.
In a decentralized way.
And I could say that if anyone who's on the platform right now who considers themselves at least not a complete newbie, I would say if you're not doing it, get to it. If you are continuing to do it, continue to do it, or if you are doing it, continue to do it. Being an ambassador for the platform is the most powerful thing that you can do, right? And that's the other thing, is everyone seems to have a stake in the overall success. When you power up, or when you stake your Hive, right? I mean, you are an equity owner in the crypto and the platform, because they are one and the same, or at least they're tied at the hip. So if you're an ambassador, be a damn good ambassador, because that's the way this thing grows, right? Interact with people, have positive conversations. You don't have to agree with them, but have a good conversation, right?
Yeah.
Don't just be a curmudgeon and kind of crap on everything. Bring some value to the table, right?
And I'll tell you this: if the dependencies, we've talked about this before. If we're dependent, if our pitch was high reward pool and you're going to make money, and you never made it on Twitter or Facebook, come here and make money. Well, that goes up and down. And also, the high reward pool is, by default and by design, a limited amount of money, of tokens each day. It is finite.
Yep.
It is finite. And it is also the decision of millions of accounts. They all get to decide up or down.
Mm-hmm.
It is not you can't have this expectation of, that was my money and now you downvoted it and took away my money. No, you have a 7-day period up and down. But I want to stress that this is a finite amount. And when you talk to large content creators, which we want, that sort of money that this could do will never incentivize them.
Yeah.
Because it can't be close to what YouTube can do.
Yeah.
To what their ads from blogs can do.
Yeah.
They make lots of money.
I would say,
and other things. This will never match that. So back to decentralization, there has to be other reward mechanisms, because they need them.
Yeah.
We can't be centralized in that. And that was my I think before I started, I was like, I probably have a different pitch than other applications on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
That this concept of decentralization has to go through all of it.
Yeah.
And it has to include reward mechanisms. There has to not just be another, there needs to be multiple.
Well, I got to be honest, it's also an insurance policy. Right? That's the other thing that I would pitch someone. If I'm not pitching one of those mega like content producers, but I'm pitching someone who has a fairly decent following. It's like that kind of like middle third, right? Those folks, I would pitch them on, you need plan B, right? Like if the switch gets flicked and this all goes away, okay, where are you going, right? You might not have a following that will transport easily, or when you do try and transport them to another platform, if you only get a small percentage of them, you're back to starving again, right? So I would say that it's also the potential for an insurance policy, right? It's risk management, essentially.
Really good content creators that are good business people, they try to take the power back to themselves as much as they can, as opposed to being dependent on others. That's why you see so many people turn off their ads, like their YouTube ads, and put in their own because they have control.
Yeah.
But then that gives some others. So hopefully you have more than one sponsor or something to that effect, or one, like ad revenue, like AdSense for like, oh, here's a Amazon affiliate sort of thing. And, they shut you down, you were too dependent perhaps. So they have multiple options.
It was pretty eye-opening when I interviewed, and she's not making, mega bucks, but when I interviewed Shadow's Pub and she was talking about making, coloring books for adults as a publisher, and she was like, well, it's fantastic because I can sell my books and things like that as I would on Web 2.0, but my posts also get upvoted. So like my marketing efforts aren't a money sink. They're a second like stream of revenue, which is also an incredibly different business structure or plan than has really existed in the past. It used to be if you were going to advertise or market, it was going to cost you money. Now you could actually earn on your marketing activity, which I think is fantastic. But one kind of comment, I guess, Daltono said, I would like to have a way to discover Hive users who live near me. There used to be a way to do this before the original Hive hard fork. Is anything like that in the development process, or?
There's already a place for you to put information into your profile, metadata. And back in the day, people said, hey, let's make a metadata line for someone to put in their location. It still exists. As far as I know, we still have an interface on PEAKD to insert your information into the metadata. So you can put location, and we show it. What he's talking about is a service, an API, that would take everyone's and then display it the way that he would like.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any parties that are working on that. We don't do API metadata stuff or API node sort of stuff presently. It may still be in HiveMind, that sort of thing. I'll ask. But even better is you can use badges to curate manually. I have created, I live in Utah most of the time. I travel a lot. I have created a badge of all of the Hive users in Utah. And so you can click on that and you can see all the posts they're doing. You can see all the people that have that badge. When you go to their profile, that badge shows up. You can click on it, go to see the others. So in seconds, you can do that. That takes someone to put in the effort. And there have been a few others for like German-speaking Swiss residents, or I don't know, all sorts of things. There are badges like that. I think, though, it's dependent on how good that person is at following up. And we have a lot of upgrades to make to badges in the future. We rolled out. What we do on PEAKD is we roll out a feature in its infancy, get a lot of feedback, and revisit and really polish it up later. but then we get distracted by even crazier, awesome things. That come out. So badges are a little bit behind the idea of suggesting to go to that badge and suggest some people so that the original person doesn't have to do all the work. That's a big one that I hope to see soon.
Yeah.
So that just becomes even more.
I also appreciate the gamification that's on the Hive platform from the standpoint of that kind of like credentialing or you know, badge type. I think it's Hive Buzz, right? Is
their awards, they give out awards. I think they do call them badges, so it's a little awkward.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. I mean, a digital credential is.
We display them on when you go to someone's profile, you click him, you can see all of the Hive Buzz awards.
Yeah, look, for someone who is into that aspect of it and wants to, you know, collect all of them or get the really hard to collect ones and things like that, or focus on one. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I appreciate that is a component, and it also is not very intrusive in the way that it's included in the platform, whereas in other platforms it takes a lot to like get enrolled and track everything and stuff like that. It's very kind of like automated in that sense. Acid came up with the idea, could have the badges automatically be given out to people depending on their location information.
Yeah, a developer type. It's not hard development, but it is development. And there have been several that have been created that automatically give people badges based on certain things. Yeah. Interactions so if anyone uses, like, you could create one for your community that if they post something, you could give them a badge, or if they post their introduce myself thing that you had talked about and they're entered into the drawing, you could give them you can automate that badge. If they use a certain set of locations like Utah or UT or, you know, something like that, it can auto give them the badge, and maybe you go through and make sure there weren't mistakes or whatever. But you can automate those sorts of things.
Yeah. No, awesome. All fantastic ideas. Look, I want to be respectful of your time. I also have to run out of here by 8:30. But one last hurrah here in terms of PEAKD. Anything that you want folks to know about PEAKD, or something that's coming down the pike, or just anything you want to share?
We were all philosophy this time around. We didn't even look at PEAKD.
Yeah, I can throw it up for a couple of minutes if you want to roll through it.
We could do it again some other time if you want. I'd love to go through and maybe a real life scenario of like taking you and another person, like a new person, and help. Like, I wanted to show you all the cool things you can do with communities. With it, you know, on PEAKD, we have a few things that others haven't integrated yet, like preferred topics, so that you're helping to drive the culture of your community. You're like, is this post about this, about Liberty News, or a community update, so people can go, oh, what's the actual official updates, or is there Liberty News, or outside the United States, or politics based, or whatever your different types of topics that you like, you know. So there's preferred topics. There's also there's a chat system that you can use. We didn't develop the chat system, but we integrated it. Some others have integrated it, some haven't. I don't think Hiveblog has. But you can have an open chat with everyone in your group, so you're not tied to Discord per se. You can have group chats. You can, there's all sorts of things you can configure in there to have like an awesome experience with communities. I love talking about that. I consider communities to be the #1 feature of PEAKD, and the analytics bear that out. Like, communities isn't that old, but it is the biggest product. The concept of, it's like Reddit, but you own it and you can control it, and you can say, talking about these like decentralization, you can own it, you control it, that's fine, but you can also say, I choose to decentralize it, and this is how I'm going to do it. Those features aren't there yet, but obviously, as you can see the trend, we will head that way to give people the tools to better decentralize a community. Ability to vote and all that stuff. Maybe that's not easy. It'll come. But for now, at least, at least you have a Reddit where some company isn't just making tons of money off of you, but you can do something. And the concept of bringing rewards to community so that you can build something that can make a lot of money. You can choose to put ads on there.
Yeah.
And your community loves it because they know that you're going to make that 100 Hive turn into 500 Hive because you're rolling it back in, you know?
Love that.
So you get to make these decisions as a community owner. We are the partner that are going to help make those things happen.
I love that. Yeah, the fact that it's not predatory or one, unidirectional. It is a partnership. I love that perspective. Because there's not, one person or one entity gains at the expense of others. I think you both grow together, which is beautiful.
So that's my proposal to you is to, if you want me back in at some point, I think that my team, my partners probably would love for me to talk about PEAKD.
100%. I am all on board with that. We will do another episode soon where we walk through like a tutorial or kind of a demonstration, which will be fantastic.
It'll still be philosophical, it will.
We can definitely talk while we work. That's perfect. Look, Jarvie, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hopefully you have a good evening. And I'm going to remind everyone, look into the Hive Liberty giveaway, 100 Hive crypto at the end of May 31st. I'll be giving it away. So definitely check the link that I threw into the comments or go to my Twitter or to my Linktree to sign up for that. So with that, Jarvie, have a really good evening. I will be back next week.
Perfect.
Bye, everyone. There are so many reasons to decentralize, whether it's lack of control over your own data, platforms where you are the product and get paid little to no money, or censorship and government oversight into your personal communications. That's why I'm taking a journey to decentralize my social media as well as my life. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out the Decentralize Everything playlist on this channel. Whether you're curious or looking to decentralize too, I would love your company as I make a move to break free, take control, and decentralize everything.